Hey everybody, welcome to another LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live, etc. I'm here. I'm Kevin Eikenberry, and today we're going to talk about your virtual meetings and how to get more engagement in them or be more engaged in them if they're not your meeting. This is a topic that's worth us talking about. We've written and talked a lot about it in the past. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share some ideas with you for the next few minutes. But if you're here with us live, I want you to share your questions. I want you to share your comments. And because I want to make this valuable for you, I've got ideas to share, but I mostly want to know what your questions are. So engagement, virtual meetings, how to get it better, how to make our virtual meetings work better. That's where we're going to go. I have with me, as always, my able and talented assistant, Marissa. Say hello, Marissa.
Hello.
She's here to monitor what's going on LinkedIn and let me know. And if you are elsewhere, I can see your comments. I hope that you will share them, your comments and your questions. I take encouragement. I take likes and thumbs and all of that stuff. All that's wonderful as well. That shows me that you're engaged, after all. So let's talk about our meetings that are virtual, and let's just start right there. Why don't people engage during virtual meetings? Well, let's go back. Let's go way back in the time clock to say, oh, I don't know, the middle of February, when most of your meetings weren't virtual and you were around a conference table. How much engagement did you have then? I mean, listen, I've been working with organizations and teams for 30 years. And one thing that's not changed is that meetings are often the bane of our existence. We know we have to have them. We feel like we go to a lot of them. We feel like many of them aren't very effective. We feel like they don't accomplish what we want to accomplish. It's no wonder people don't engage. And so there's a lot of conversation now about getting engagement in our virtual meetings, and it's appropriate. But it's no more appropriate, really, than the fact that we didn't have engagement when we were all around the conference table. Now we're on our kitchen table and we're not engaging either. But what specifically about virtual meetings is making this a challenge? Well, it's easy for us to do other things, right? It's easier for us to be noticing other things, to maybe multitask. Hopefully by this point you're using your webcams, which makes it a little harder to tell that you're doing this with your phone or whatever. But people are pretty good at figuring out how to make that look a little bit better. And in fact, we can see our own face on the camera, so we have a clue about how obvious or not that might be. But there are some other reasons why people don't engage in virtual meetings. And one of those is that they're poor meetings. I've sort of hinted at that. I'll say more about that in a minute. But the other one is that the technology, as good as it now is, and as helpful as it now is, there's always, and even if we're using our cameras, there's always the issue of, do I get in? If I start to say something, am I going to interrupt somebody else? Interruptions are higher, so it's easier for us to say, I just won't say anything because I don't want to mess it up or whatever. So there's lots of reasons we don't engage, and I want to talk about some things that we can do to improve that as we go. But before we do that, let's talk about the other thing that's going on right now, and are you having too many of them? Lots of people talking about Zoom fatigue, virtual meeting fatigue, screen fatigue. All of those things, I suppose, are real. Some organizations are having more meetings than ever, maybe for good reasons and maybe not, right? So I would say, let's make sure we're only meeting when we know why we're meeting and that there's a good reason to do it, not just because we want to make sure we're checking in with everybody. Should we be, as leaders, meeting with our individuals on our teams? Yes, of course. I don't really think of that as a meeting. A one-on-one to me isn't a meeting. But if you frame it as such, that's fine too. I'm really talking today about sessions that have 3 or more people in them. So I think in many cases there are too many right now. But the key is, let's make sure we're meeting for reasons that require a meeting, whether it's virtual or otherwise. So let me just say this: planning, please. So several things about planning. I think as important as planning is for meetings always, wherever we are, I think it may be more important even when it's virtual. But Marissa tells me that she has a question. So Marissa, lay that question on us.
I have a question from LinkedIn from Sky, and she says, how do you get people to be more engaged on virtual training?
Virtual training, that's a great point. Here's my first question, and so I'm going to make a couple things, and so Sky, feel free to just add into this as I go, and Marissa, you can just interrupt me, right, if Sky says something. So virtual training, we do a lot of it and have done it for a long time, and the first thing is a webinar isn't training. Oftentimes in a webinar, we're talking about we can have lots and lots of people, right? Like right now, we could have an unlimited, in theory, number of people that are with us. But you can't have, just like you can't have the same engagement in a keynote that you can have in a group of 5 people around a table, right? We have to recognize what level of engagement can we get. So if we're doing, so I'd love to know, Sky, like how many people, when you're talking about virtual training, how many people you're talking about. So if we're talking about 10 to maybe 15, then there are definitely things that we can do to engage folks in a virtual training session. And the first one of those things is to set clear expectations that we want that we expect that this isn't a webinar, even if it's on a webinar platform, that this is training, this is meant to be interactive, etc. If you're, depending on the tool you're using, you can also put people in breakout rooms, which I'm a big fan of. Just like if I had 20 people in a classroom, I would have them do a lot of work and have discussions in groups of, in table groups of 5 or 6 people, right? So she says 10 to 20 people, cool. So at the lower end of that, I might not need to do breakouts. In the higher end of that, I might need to make sure that there's plenty of space and time and make it okay for people to jump in. One of the things that all of this new work from home has done for us is it's getting people more comfortable with these cameras. And so some of the anxiety about saying something with a larger on a virtual setting is going away, which is really good. But if I'm in that higher end, I'm going to really encourage you to think about, I've got to slow down. I've got to be more patient. I've got to set clear expectations. And if I really want input from people, I need to ask them for that input. Hey, I haven't heard anything from the people in the accounting department, or I haven't heard anything from the people in the Cincinnati office or whatever. I'm going to probably be more directive with asking for input than I might have to be in a face-to-face setting. That's one thing. So set clear expectations, be more directive if I need to be. The closer we get to 20, depending on the platform you're using, if you can put people in breakout rooms, by all means do that. Utilize your chat. All of it doesn't have to happen in vocally necessarily. You can have people answer a question in chat and then do almost like what I'm doing now, which is to go back and then talk about those with everybody. But even with 20, you should be able, I really do have something on my nose, excuse me. You really should be able to engage people if you set clear expectations up front and make sure that you're getting them engaged early. It's one thing to say, hey, I really want your questions, I really want your input, and then talk for 40 minutes and say, what have you got? Well, your actions said way more than your words. If I really want to engage people, I need to engage them from the very beginning. Set the clear expectation and get them in right away. Hey, let's do a poll. Let's do any number of other things that we could do. So those would be a few things that I would think about. But I'm a big believer that we can have highly effective synchronous, meaning we're all at it at the same time, virtually, in terms of training and learning experiences. I'm a big believer that we can do it. And we've just got to encourage people a little bit more. Okay. She is using Zoom. So the good news is if you're using Zoom, you should be able to set up breakout rooms. And I would encourage you to think about doing that, especially if you're closer to that 20 number. Marissa has another question. So what else have you got for me, Marissa?
Yes. So I have Jackie from LinkedIn, and she says, ways to engage during VC training, polling slides, learning checks, breakout rooms, Kahoot, have them raise their hands, icons. So, I just realized this is not a question. But
it's comments. It's ideas.
It's comments. It's ideas. I'm so sorry, Jackie.
So why don't you say that again for everybody's benefit, and then I will make a couple of comments.
Yes. So Jackie says some other ways to engage during virtual training: to use polling slides, to use learning checks, breakout rooms, Kahoot. Jackie, you may need to let us know, is that a program or is that something else? And to have them raise their virtual hands. So there's like icons that you can press inside those programs. She also said she recommends a virtual tour of the classroom to educate the learner how to use the environment more effectively.
Super important. If you've got folks that aren't familiar with the platform that you're using, then there's two things going on. They don't know how to use the platform, but they're also a bit anxious or tentative about it. So you may need to take a few minutes. Thank you, Jackie. It's an excellent point. You need maybe take a few minutes on the front end and say, hey, let's make sure everybody knows how this is going to work and how you get in and out of the breakout rooms and all of those things. I have run a couple of those where I made assumptions, bad assumptions about that. And it's not a catastrophe, but it takes a little longer. So recognize, well, it also says you make sure you know how to use your tools. Jackie gave you a bunch of suggestions, the virtual hand raising and all those things. Of course, you want to do those things. If you're doing virtual training or learning sessions, you want to be able to share a screen with a whiteboard or use a page in a document or in a PowerPoint where you can type in, so you can do what you would do on a whiteboard in a room or a flip chart. Do those same kinds of things. Pretty much anything you can do in a live session, person-to-person session, we can do virtually. We've got to know the tools. We've got to make sure that they know the tools. That tour is a really, really important point if your folks don't already know the tool. The good news is that perhaps now that's less of an issue than it's been in the past, but it's still an important thing to consider, because just because you know it doesn't mean they do. And just because they've been on a bunch of Zoom meetings doesn't mean that they know how to get in and out of a breakout room, for example. Right? So it's an excellent point. Okay, Marissa has more information for me, so go ahead, Marissa.
So Jackie just explained Kahoot is a game you can play. The base version is free. She loves it. It's a fun way to engage and reinforce learning, and it kind of sounds like we need to check it out too.
Kahoot, K-A-H-O-O-T, at least is what you say to me. So for everyone who's on other platforms, you now know that. So let me thank you for that little diversion off on training. I want to come back and talk about meetings a little bit more and say that the single biggest reason that meetings fail, virtual or otherwise, is that there wasn't enough planning done ahead of time by the leader or facilitator, and that doesn't then allow the team members to come engaged. If I'm in a meeting and I don't know why I'm there, or I'm in a meeting and I'm not well enough prepared, how can I be engaged? It's almost impossible. Now, I might be an extrovert and I might start talking, but that's not the kind of engagement that we necessarily want, right? So we've got to make sure that we know what our meeting is, and made very clear to people what success looks like in the meeting. I'm a big believer in what we call desired outcomes. People ought to know what the desired outcome is for the meeting before they arrive. That helps them be prepared, and that helps us all know during the session when we are done. A desired outcome is noun, verb, past tense, describing what success looks like. When we've done this, we are finished. So by doing that planning on the front end, it helps us determine, one, should we even meet? Two, gives us a clue about how long we need to meet. Three, helps us determine who ought to be there. And obviously, the more people, the less people will be engaged in terms of participating. And then four, it helps people come better prepared, which also helps them be able to engage more. It's just the way it is, right? I want to make another comment, because I said we're talking about engagement, and usually people want to think about engagement equaling talking. Not necessarily true. It's not true. I spent a long time in my career facilitating meetings and training, thinking about, well, if they're not saying anything, then they're not engaged, which is absolutely not true. It's spoken like a true extrovert, first of all. And second of all, engagement means are people taking ownership? Are they paying attention? Are they focused? Does this matter to them? Which might include them speaking and might not. It's just that it's a little harder to figure it out or to get a sense of that when people are virtual, especially as the group gets larger, as the number of videos that you see get larger, and that sort of thing. But I would strongly encourage you to think carefully about what you mean by engagement. Next, have some rules, ground rules, agreements, set some expectations. I've already said a little bit about that. If you want people to participate, tell them that up front. Make sure that if you want them to participate, that you're using questions that allow them to actually say something. Set people up to succeed with the questions that you're asking to engage them more in what you're doing. But set some clear ground rules. Here are some ground rules on our team. You're going to have your camera on unless you're having a technical problem. That helps with engagement in and of itself. You're going to be off of mute unless you've got a bunch of ambient background noise or other technical issues. That means you need to be on mute. I want to have people off of mute so that it's closer to a real meeting where they can just reach out and break in and say something. Like Marissa could right now say, hey, Kevin, I've got a question. We happen to have a tool right now for the two of us to see where she can chat with me and tell me that. That helps us not have the interruptions, but she also knows that in this particular case, while it's not a meeting, it is virtual, that she can also just say, hey, Kevin, I've got something. We've set up the ground rule to use our private chat to allow her to let me know when she's got something so that we don't have to mess up the flow. She also knows that if it was pertinent, she could just pop in, right? So set some agreements, set the expectation of what we want success to look like, and that will really, really help us. People have been to lots of meetings that weren't very good, and they've been to lots of meetings where there were no negative consequences for them not engaging. So if you want them to, you've got to set it as an expectation, right? You've got to set it as an expectation. I want to do one more thing. I've been thinking about this a lot, and there are a lot of people that have been doing some things around this, and I'm saying this is beyond the work. Here's my thought. Right now, we're meeting a lot as teams, and that's fine, and that's probably good. Let's make sure we're not overdoing it, but we're meeting as teams, and a lot of groups right now are thinking we want to make sure we're keeping our group connected, and so they're looking for ways to make meetings a little more fun, add a team building component to the rest of the meeting that's more about the work. We could argue that the building of the team is part of the work, but I think you know what I mean by the difference between doing a project review and doing something that's more about team camaraderie. So lots of people have been writing stuff about this. I've done a bunch of things. I've shared some of these ideas here, and I'm going to share a couple of ideas with you here in just a second. But I really would love for you, if you're here or if you're watching later, to say, if you're interested in more about this, more about exercises and games and team building that you can do virtually, please let me know in the comments. Just let us know, hey, that would be useful, because I've been thinking about that a lot, thinking about creating some things, but I don't want to create it if the world doesn't really need it, right? So I just encourage you to think about that. And if you would like more, to let me know. And that will give me some feedback, which is always helpful. A couple of ideas. I wrote about this the other day, but I don't think I've shared it on one of these sessions. That one of the things I did with our team a couple of weeks ago was I did what is called a gratitude ring. And I just, at the end of our meeting, and just to give you context, our team is 12 people. I asked, I said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask everyone to share one thing that they're grateful for today. Don't have to explain it. Don't have to justify it. Just one thing that you're grateful for today. I'll go first, and then I'll pick someone to go next. And then that person can pick who goes next. And we just went around the group randomly. By the way, there's another key to your engagement virtually, which is don't let people know who's going to go next. Make it fun or make it unusual or create ways to keep everybody on the edge of their seat because they don't know when it's going to be their turn. So anyway, the gratitude ring is one thing that you're grateful for, and we just went around. And so I did it. I tagged someone else. They went next. They tagged someone else. They went next until all of us had done it. And while I believe that is always a critically important question that we ought to be asking ourselves personally, right now it's maybe as important as ever. And to share that with others. When all of us as a group are in different places mentally and emotionally, we all have something we're grateful for. So that helps us center ourselves. But hearing the other things from others are of super great value. Okay. So more people are saying they want more ideas in the future, so we will do that. Jackie said scavenger hunts in people's homes. Yes, very true. Marissa knows, because Marissa is not only my able assistant here today and a member of my team, she's also my daughter-in-law. And we did an event that I called a virtual Olympics a couple of weeks ago that I included a scavenger hunt in. It wasn't at work, but I can tell you it created tremendous energy. Let me give you another one that you can do that you don't have to have any preparation for, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to put something very close to it won't work as well in this particular setting, but you get the idea. I'm going to put something very close to my webcam and slowly pull it out. And as soon as you figure out what it is, I want you to type in what it is. If we were in a small group, I would have you shout it out. But what I just want you to do is to type it in whichever channel you're in when you see it. I just pick something off of my desk. There are too many things on my desk. I'm going to start really close to the camera, pull it out slowly. Just type in when you figure out what it is. Okay, are you ready? Here it is. Well, clearly, it's my business card. But you can see that's a simple thing that gets people engaged. You could go around and have everybody pick something off of their desk to do that with. It could be anything. They could show their mask. They could show an ink pen. They could show anything, paperclip, whatever. So there's something that you could do. The scavenger hunt thing is a great idea. And because everyone's working from home, there's all sorts of things you can have in the scavenger hunt. You could even just say, okay, you got 90 seconds. Everyone that comes back, in 90 seconds, you need to have a hat on. And you have people flying around, coming back, having a hat on. And then what? You get some laughter. You get everyone to see the kind of hats that people showed up with, et cetera, et cetera. Marissa, you've got another idea from LinkedIn. What do you got?
Yes. So Sky also said she loves the question, what habit have you started or broken during this time versus how you're doing?
It's a great question. What habit have you broken? What habit have you started? What routine is working for you? So anything like that that helps people talk about what's working that they can share with each other. There's like the learning that's going on there. There's the sharing that's going on there. And maybe some people are getting a new idea from their teammates. It's trust building. It's a bunch of stuff. Here's another one. What's the first thing you're going to do when you no longer have to be sheltered in place? And people can talk about what they're going to get a haircut. That's probably mine. Whatever that might be. And again, a little chance to have a little fun, et cetera, et cetera. Here's another one. Where's everybody real quickly? Next time when you're able to get out of your house and get on with your life, where do you want to go on vacation first? And people can share that. And they may have, again, a chance not only to share and to have some levity, but also to learn a little bit about each other and finding ways to connect each other a little bit more. Okay, so it sounds like maybe there's the chance and the need to do even more of that. And so hopefully we'll do some more of that, whether I do them on lives, whether I do it in a blog post, we'll come up with some way to do that in the coming days and weeks. Before we finish today, I want to thank you all for being here. And I want to tell you as well, I'm going to put this up here while I finish. We have created a learning process, a learning tool, a digital learning tool called 12 Weeks to Becoming a Great Remote Teammate. And you can learn more about it right there, remoteleadershipinstitute.com/12 weeks. You can go there to learn more about that. But I want to tell you what we're starting to do. If you've been following me, you know that I've been doing these Q&As, and I will continue to do them with less frequency moving forward. But I am going to start have more guests join me. And I already have 2 guests lined up for next week, one on Monday, which has just been announced this morning, with Mary Abijay, who wrote the great book, Managing Up. We're going to talk about managing up and influencing when we're all working remotely. And next Wednesday, this is the first announcement of it because we haven't put it online in any way, but I'm going to have Jennifer Conweiler with me, and we're going to talk about introverts and remote work. And she's written now 4 books about things related to introverted leaders, and her new book is coming out in June. We're going to talk a little bit about the book, but we're mostly going to talk about how do we, if we are an introvert, what are the things we need to be thinking about in a remote workplace? And if we're not an introvert, how do we work with those introverts in a remote workplace? So we're going to continue to try to bring experts to the table where we can have some fun, and at the same time can bring their expertise and connect it to this new world of work that more and more of us are in. If you didn't know, we were remote before remote was cool, to tag off of the old song. We've been doing this remote stuff for a long time, and so happy to continue to share some of what we've learned, not only in doing it, but in working with remote teams and remote leaders over the last number of years. Up there in the corner, you see the picture of our new book coming in a few months, called The Long Distance Teammate. And so I want to thank you for being here today, as we've talked a little bit about making our virtual meetings a little bit more engaging. And I'm glad that we talked a little bit about training as well. Great conversation, great questions and suggestions. Thank you for all of you that chimed in. And I want to thank you for being here. As always, we'll be back soon, Monday for sure, with our guest. But until then, I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope that you will be well, be safe, and be remarkable.